Thank you, Kenichi.
Oh, yes. Good morning, everybody. It is really my privilege to present to all of you my friend Jeanelle Austin, whom I got to know during when she was working at Fuller. Jeanelle Austin is the creator of Racial Agency Initiative, a racial justice leadership coaching company. She's also the lead caretaker of the memorial, George Floyd Memorial, where she guides a team of volunteers to stand in the unique space of preservation and protest. She began tending to the memorial during the first week of the protest as a form of social resistance and self-care. Every day, the memorial looked different. And every day, she and others would tend to both the new and old offerings so that the story could be preserved. Jeanelle earned a BA in Christian Ministries from Messiah College and an MDiv in Ethics and an MA in Intercultural Studies from Fuller Theological Seminary. She consults and speaks nationwide on various topics as they intersect with race in America. A native resident of Minneapolis, Jeanelle grew up blocks away from the intersection of 38th and Chicago in Bryant neighborhood and joyfully serves the community alongside brothers and sisters in the ongoing fight for racial justice. And if I may just slip in a little bit more here, Jeanelle has been a matriarchal figure for me and has challenged me to reshape my public theology. And for that, I am eternally grateful. And her voice really shook the consciousness of Fuller. And I'm so grateful to present to all of you once again to introduce Jeanelle Austin. Jeanelle, go ahead, speak to us.
My dear friend, Kenichi, thank you so much for that kind introduction and your words of love. It is my honor and privilege to share in community with all of you today. And I'm coming from Minneapolis, Minnesota with this shift that we have gone through as a world from being physically in person to Zoom platforms or video conferencing platforms. It has allowed us to connect with people who we would never actually connect with. And so there are blessings even in the midst of trying times. Today, I am going to read from the book of Joshua, chapter 4, verses 1 through 9 and 19 through 24. And I'll be reading from the New International Version. It reads, "When the whole nation had finished crossing the Jordan, the Lord said to Joshua, 'Choose 12 men from among the people, one from each tribe, and tell them to take up 12 stones from the middle of the Jordan, from right where the priests are standing, and carry them over with you and put them down at the place where you stay tonight.' So Joshua called together the 12 men he had appointed from the Israelites, one from each tribe, and said to them, 'Go over before the ark of the Lord your God into the middle of the Jordan. Each of you is to take up a stone on his shoulder, according to the number of the tribes of the Israelites, to serve as a sign among you. In the future, when your children ask you, what do these stones mean? Tell them that the flow of the Jordan was cut off before the ark of the covenant of the Lord. When it crossed the Jordan, the waters of the Jordan were cut off. These stones are to be a memorial to the people of Israel forever.' So the Israelites did as Joshua commanded them. They took 12 stones from the middle of the Jordan, according to the number of tribes of the Israelites, as the Lord had told Joshua, And they carried them over with them to their camp, where they put them down. Joshua set up the 12 stones that had been in the middle of the Jordan at the spot where the priests who carried the Ark of the Covenant had stood. And they are there to this day. On the 10th day of the first month, the people went up from the Jordan and encamped at Gilgal on the eastern border of Jericho. And Joshua set up at Gilgal the 12 stones they had taken out of the Jordan. He said to the Israelites, "In the future, when your descendants ask their parents, 'What do these stones mean?' Tell them, 'Israel crossed the Jordan on dry ground. For the Lord your God dried up the Jordan before you until you had crossed over. The Lord your God did to the Jordan what he had done to the Red Sea when he dried it up before us until we had crossed over. He did this so that all the peoples of the earth might know that the hand of the Lord is powerful, and so that you might always fear the Lord your God." The word of the Lord. Let's pause for a brief prayer. God, in this time, in this season, in this moment, we ask that your presence be ever near. We ask that you would open our ears, open our hearts, open our minds to what your Spirit has to offer us this day. God, and may we not only be hearers of the word, but doers also. May your grace and your peace be upon us all in this moment, and may we be faithful to what you have given us to hear today. Amen. So, the title of my sermon today is simply, "What do these stones mean?" On July 6, 2016, Philando Castile was lynched by the St. Anthony Police Department in Minnesota. The day after Alton Sterling was lynched by the Baton Rouge Police Department in Louisiana. At the time, I worked for Fuller Theological Seminary, and Black students from across the institution's campuses were calling and emailing me, asking how the institution was going to respond. I remember the only space I had to grieve that day was while I was brushing my teeth. I felt all my rage, and the question that was on the hearts and the minds of so many BIPOC seminarians was simply this: why is the white church so silent? We unapologetically organized a protest in 24 hours at the steps of Peyton Hall at Fuller Seminary in Pasadena, California, to protest the excessive use of force by police violence and the overwhelming silence of the white evangelical church. On May 25th, 2020, George Floyd was lynched by the Minneapolis Police Department, about a 30-minute drive from where Philando Castile's life was taken. Out of response to this atrocity, the people started to build a memorial to remember George Floyd. This time, the church was not so silent. This time, the church showed up, but their presence was problematic as many denounced the memorial, calling it a shrine. Congregations became more interested in having a captive audience at George Floyd Square than about justice. Canvassers would interrupt conversations to ask if people knew Jesus and get in theological debates. Once again, the church had missed the mark. I have to wonder if this cognitive dissonance that exists within evangelical churches is rooted in our lack of understanding the stories of the First Testament. Have we become so entrenched in the letters to the churches that we have neglected to internalize the stories of the people? So we find ourselves today in the book of Joshua, at the point where the Hebrew people were about to cross the Jordan River to fight for the land of Canaan as their inheritance. If you remember, they were enslaved for 400 years. God heard their cry and raised up Moses in Pharaoh's house to grow into the role of prophet and priest to deliver the Hebrews from captivity. The first time God parts the waters is at the Red Sea to finish off the army of Egypt, the empire that had enslaved them. The people wandered in the desert for 40 years so God could prepare them to fight for their freedom. But Moses had disobeyed the instruction of God and was not allowed to enter into the promised land, which would commence with a second parting of waters. This time, it was the Jordan River. And this time, Joshua was at the lead. Now, this was during flood season, and God held up the water upstream so that the people could cross on dry land downstream. And while the priests with the Ark of the Covenant were situated in the middle of the river as symbols of the power of God moving to keep the river parted, God instructed Joshua to have each tribe grab a stone and build a memorial. Why? Well, we learn later in the text that it really was so that the generations would never forget what God did. And more importantly, what God can do. It's been 402 years since the transatlantic slave trade began. The formation of this country has been cruel to Black people. It kidnapped and human trafficked us. It stripped us naked of our clothes and of our names. It raped us to birth slaves. It separated our families. It lynched us to create terror. It refused us education. It refused us access to wellness. It refused us jobs. It gave us diseases. It placed sorrow deep in our bones. It traumatized us. It freed us and re-enslaved us multiple times over. It built systems and narratives to keep us enslaved in the eyes and minds of the public. And it is time to be free. We have this saying in George Floyd Square, that is the intersection of 38th Street East and Chicago Avenue South here in Minneapolis, Minnesota, where George Floyd took his last breath. We say that the earth protests with us. We recognize that the ways in which God is acting is supernatural and undeniable. This movement is so divine that over a year ago, some of my neighbors claimed to not be spiritual. And now they claim that God is in it all. And just like God had 12 people from the tribes of Israel take stones from the river as a memorial for the generations to come, God has moved people representing so many walks of life, cultures, people groups, and families to contribute something as an offering to this memorial to help us remember what God has done, what God is doing, and what God will do. And the churches are struggling with this. I think just maybe we became so afraid of building idols that we neglected the building of memorials. We have blurred the lines between worship and remembrance, and we have neglected the practice of remembrance through physical objects as a part of the story of our faith. But why? Why do we even need to remember? Why do we need to create memorials? What this story in Joshua points out to us is that it is not just about us. You see, God has always been in the business of saving all people. So even when we had that song play earlier today, I was like, you know what? This song is right on point for this sermon today. Because God has always been in the business of saving all people. And by all people, I do not just mean the people who are alive today. God also has in mind those who are yet to grace this earth with their presence. Someday our children will see the memorials the people the people built and ask, what does this mean? Do you have any idea that that very question, that the very act of building memorials opens the door for people who we may never meet to know who God is and what God did and what God is doing and what God can do for them? And at the very end of the passage, we learn that the memorial really is for the world to know God. God is not just here to save us. God is using our liberation to remind the world that they too are saved through God. If we do not choose to actively remember the ways in which God is at work in the world, we rob future generations of the opportunity to know just how great our God is. But that is just the thing. Not only has the church not actively participated in the remembrance of how God is at work in the world today to free the oppressed, we participate in the disremembrance when we neglect to pause and recognize how God is at work in the world, rescuing entire people groups from the death grip of empire. Or when we take what is established to help us remember and seek to tear it down or discredit it. We participate in the erasure of story, which is a characteristic of colonization and colonial practices. I think too often we forget the ways in which the church participates as an extension of the empire rather than an extension of the kingdom of God. Rather than leading freedom movements, we are silencing freedom movements. Rather than educating the youth, we are denouncing them. Rather than freeing and providing for the oppressed, we are finding ways to systematically evict the homeless, police the overpoliced, restrict the wages of the underemployed, and reduce the access of health and healthcare to people who are in need of it most. And when we do this, it is more often than not because access to funding is involved, or because we ourselves do not know we too are captive and in need of being free. Now, I recognize that I speak knowing my context in Minneapolis. Yet, regardless of context, my question to you is simply this: how are you remembering what God is doing? How are you preserving the stories for our children? Have you paid attention to the ways in which God has leveraged the earth to remind us that God is still God? And when was the last time you captured a piece of the earth to remind you that God showed up on behalf of those in need? Can you memorialize the work of God around you so that someone else might come along and ask the simple question, what does this mean? Brothers and sisters, it is imperative that we remember the truth of what is happening and how God is at work in the world. We need to tell the stories of generations for generations to come. We need to memorialize the ways in which God is leading people of all kinds into places of freedom, into a kind of salvation that only God can give. Will you join me? Amen.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yes, thank you for that. So many things went across my heart as you were speaking. Um, I don't know if I could articulate what you released in me today, and I trust in others, but I just started thinking about the monuments that, first of all, the monuments like, the National Museum of African American History and Culture, at the Smithsonian. I thought about the Lynching Museum. I thought about the removal of monuments that are false, particularly in the former Confederacy. But before we go any further, I'm going to give everybody a chance to revisit one another and share what's on their hearts or pray with one another. I love you. I love you. I love you, Lord, today because you care for me in such a special way. I praise you. I lift you up and I magnify your name. That's why my heart is filled with praise. I love you. I love you. Love you, Lord, today because you care for me in such a special way. I praise you, lift you up, and I magnify your name. That's why my heart is filled with praise. I love you. I love you. I love you, Lord, today because you cared for me in such a special way. And I praise you, I lift you up, and I magnify your name. That's why my heart is filled with praise. Heart, mind, my soul belong to you because you died for me way back in Calvary. I praise you, I lift you up, and I still magnify your name. That's why my heart is filled with praise. Why my heart is filled with praise. Why my heart is filled with praise. I love you. love you, Lord, today, 'cause you cared for me way back on Calvary. I praise you, I lift you up, and I magnify your name. That's why my heart is filled with praise. Oh, that's why my heart is filled with praise. That's why my heart is filled with praise. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, 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 yeah. Welcome back, everybody. So I'm interested in your takeaways and what question you might have for Jeanelle. What thoughts you have?
I'm gonna kind of hi y'all. This is Paula from Nashville. I'm just gonna kind of continue what I was sharing with Jeanelle on our the small group chats. A couple of things. How you use the word lynching when you were describing the first two incidents of just horrificness, the first two souls, and then you got to Floyd. And then I realized I was thinking maybe you were talking about something in history that I wasn't aware of, but then I realized you're using that word, which is perfectly appropriate for what the hell's been going on.
Mm-hmm.
And it just choked me up because when it just inspired me even more to do with the things like I'm in the world of entertainment, and that's what I hope to do with the work I do is those those relics, entertainment relics in a way that can hopefully be a part of telling the stories. So I'm just kind of like in awe over here. I'm a bit of a fangirl right now of you, Jeanelle. So for all good purposes, because it's like, it, it's just one at a time. Like what was open, the whole session was open with the starfish. Saving one starfish at a time. Can you save them all? Well, but I just saved this one. So you made a huge impression on me with that, Jeanelle. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. I mean, it's so important that we don't divorce what's happening in our society right now from history. I think one of the ways in which racism likes to work, it morphs. It's like a virus where like every season it just changes shape and moves differently. And so the mistake that we can make is not identifying it for what it is, and not connecting those stories in history, because then we'll start from ground zero, as opposed to saying, no, we've been here before, we know what this is, let's name it for what it is and address it for what it is. And I think by calling it lynchings and acknowledging it, that they are public lynchings, it really is an indictment of our country to say that you have not stopped this horrific treatment of Black people. And it's also to acknowledge that as Black folks, we're not fully free. like either you're free or you're not. You're not like partially changed. You're free or you're not. So we're not free. If we always have to have this kind of terrorism that lives over our lives, that at any given day, if someone with a law enforcement badge will have the authority to take our life and be justified through the court system, we're not truly free. And so we need to be able to call the attention to it's the same thing. What we saw through Jim Crow, it just looks different in 2021.
Wow, you know, as you're talking, Janelle, makes me think that instead of one Sunday morning, it seems like we kind of need like a 3-day retreat to explore all of this, and you know, to really take a deep dive. And Paul, I appreciate you bringing up entertainment, because instantly I thought of the work of people like Raoul Peck and Ava DuVernay. That those are monuments. I mean, they're docufilms, but they are monuments, so that we make sure we don't forget. So thank you for that. Anybody else?
Closed. Mute audio. Currently unmuted.
Hi, I'll say a little something. So shortly after,
Host has spotlight. Your video for everyone.
there we go. Sorry about that. So I had visited George Floyd Square in June after the killing of George Floyd, and I describe it. I just want to uplift the space and my experience there, and the caretaking that you and the community have done together, because it was so rooted in community. It wasn't about a single person. It was about sticking together, and it was a spiritual experience being there, because like it was the ability to hold the tensions of anger and joy in the same place and in the same hand and with one another, and it was so beautiful and profound. It was the most authentic joy that I'd experienced there, and it was the most authentic grief of individuals expressing their grief there, and being in solidarity with one another. And so it was just yeah, just so much gratitude for your caretakingness and the team of people that have come together in that space, and just yeah, it's been profound watching it through live streams through Unicorn Riot and other media folks who have, you know, shown the journey. So just so much gratitude for you for the work that you do. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Matt, where are you from, by the way?
Oakland, Fremont Bay Area. I'm in Santa Barbara with David's community.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wonderful, beautiful. Thank you for coming and holding space with us. You're absolutely right. Like we say in George Floyd Square, community is the antidote to racism. And in a time in Minneapolis when people are talking, we're in this debate about defunding the police or removing the police department altogether, so on and so forth. And our advocacy as a community has looked at more restorative justice. We don't really talk about the police much because they don't really deserve to be on our lips after what they've done in our neighborhood. And so one of the things we say is if we really want to defund the police, we have to stop outsourcing the responsibility of being community to the police. And so when we think about, or when things happen, what does it look like to call your neighbor? What does it look like to call a mental health resources? What does it look like to just straight up call the fire department? And without the police escort, we formed 612 MASH, which is an on-site medical organization that responds to trauma. We have community meetings daily, every morning, evening. It started June 15th, 2020, and we still have them. I went to the morning meeting this morning. We increase communication between neighbors. We lean in. We have a multiple group chats for Fast Ask. People give their skill sets. Like if they're builders, they build. If they're teachers, they teach. Everyone gives out of their gifts and skill sets. A lot like the church in Acts too.
Draw your own starfish.
But it really is leading into community that we learn each other and we stop fearing each other. The communal reading today talked a lot about the beloved community that Martin Luther King pushed during the civil rights movement. And it takes effort and work to build community. Not a lot of people understand that and realize that. But it's also the reason why most people don't actually put in the effort and work to actually know their neighbors, because it's work. And so, but we're committed to justice. And so we lead into community. So thank you. Thank you for your testimony, Matt.
We just wanted to say how brilliant your message is today and how much faith you restore in our future generations. It is this right here. When people say, what can we do? You know, and like you said, with the reading at the beginning, the starfish one at a time, we do have skill sets, each of us individually. You're brilliant. And what you shared with us today, that offers us hope and organization, which we need.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Clint. I appreciate that.
You know, my prayer is that all of us will do whatever we can, that I will do whatever I can to develop community so that we don't just talk about it, but that it happens, that we make it happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And and it's in the context of a community that we actually do that work of remembrance, right? It in that scripture in Joshua, they had to select members of the tribes to actually go and get the stones and carry the stones, lift them out of the river, and then put them down in the place where they had encamped. And that was work. That was heavy work. Those stones were heavy. And it took the people to do it together. And I think that there's power when we're able to come together. There's power in the people. We have this big sign that says, "Where there's people, there's power," and that's very true.
I want to say one more thing. So much of my work is around reparations, and I'm being reminded of the one of the first early 5 phases of the reparations process is a process called demonumentalizing. And I'm the stuff going down in Texas this past week. There was you used the word disremembrance, and I was like, oh, that's a profound word, because what they're doing in Texas right now is not saying that we need to hear the other side of the Holocaust experience. So we need to teach both sides, and that's a form of disremembrance by the church, by the church and the greater church, the Christian empire, and so in the form of demonumentalizing, taking down monuments to empire, monuments to colonization. And so I recall that as one of the early phases of the reparative process. And so and how do we what is the truth-telling process is a memorialization. It is a ceremony of where we've been and the harm that has taken place and how we're going to move forward in the healing process. So yeah, just appreciate you naming that.
Absolutely. And it's so important that the people do it and not the government. Yep. And here's why: because the government is complicit and they're going to try to take the narrative and spin it so that they're in a good light for history books, right? Yep. And so we have to preserve the truth of the story and the truth of what happened. And so the people have to do that. We can't outsource that work to the government because the story will be misconstrued. And we need to center the voices of Black and Indigenous people and Latinx people and marginalized people, because these are people who know the truth. And their stories need to be told and written down and lifted up for the generations to hear, so that people will know what God has done in and through and for us.
I would think, who was somebody going to say something?
Yeah, I just have a question.
Yeah, Jacob.
How do I, as a young man in my 30s, have as much faith as my elders do in change? What I'm asking is, I was at a party with my god uncle 2 weeks ago, who is almost 80 and a politician, and he said, enjoy your single payer health care, it's coming. And I'm like, oh my God, how did he noticed, and my mom is freaking telling me there's better days ahead for me and other people, and I don't feel that as someone who does activism every day. So how do I have faith? How do you have faith that things will get better? Is my question.
How do I have faith that things will improve?
That
Is that what I heard?
yeah,
Okay. You know,
how do you?
hopelessness is the greatest battle. I think that when we're facing these kinds of generational trauma and generational terror, um, it cruelty is the point, is what we say as well here in our community. The point of the empire and the systems and structures that be is to be cruel, is to discourage, is to bring hopelessness, so that the people don't rise up and ask for justice, so that the people don't rise up and expect to be treated as fully human, so that the people don't rise up um, to seek their equality, because in that uprising is it's going to cost them something. Jesus says that whoever's going to follow him is going to have to give up some stuff. Um, and what we find, especially in this capitalistic society, is that people don't want to give up power and wealth and money and status and influence. Like, people don't want to give it up to actually do justice, to do the right thing. I like to say justice is the process of making things right. My hope comes from a deeply seated belief that we are supposed to be living on the other side of justice, and that we can live on the other side of justice. It's not just this thing where it's like, oh, one day when I get to heaven, everything will be all right. Like, no. One day before I die, we will make things all right, because that is the way God desires on earth. And so that is what gives me hope. And then also this scripture passage in Hebrews that says, Jesus, who for the joy set before him endured the cross. So to think that the joy of the salvation of all humanity gave Jesus the strength to endure a criminal's death, like it's the joy of the salvation of the people who are most oppressed and marginalized that gives me the strength to keep going. I truly believe that we can live on the other side of justice, because somebody is in need of a deep salvation. And so if God can use me, I'll do what I can with what I've been given.
You know, you made me think of the reality that Black joy is real.
Hey.
You know, it's a real quantity. You know, not fully definable, but it's a gift that we earned. And I was thinking that along with monuments, we want to make sure that we are heeding the stories of our elders and our ancestors. Now I am an elder, and I feel like my stories, in fact, I've written, a lot of my experience, and I'm writing now. But I feel like the, younger generations will have more hope if they understand what we have overcome more specifically, as real stories.
Can I speak to that for a minute, because you've touched on something that I've been in dialogue with some friends with as of late. This idea of memorialization within the Black tradition, not necessarily being physical structures, but actually being a memorialization that actually happens in the spirit, in the soul. And it was brought up because we were acknowledging the fact that there's a lot of young people and youth today who know when Tupac and Biggie died, like, and they weren't even alive when that happened, but they could spit their rhymes, they could spit their lyrics, and they understand those prophetic voices, and they have been memorialized in the Black community in a way where you can't go and visit a memorial for Tupac or Biggie, but when you come and gather in community and people start spitting lines, like, it's just like you're there, right, with everyone together. And as I begin to reflect on that, I remember when I was 15 years old, I took a trip to Botswana, Africa, and we were spending time in the bush, and we came across this village. They had this big, gigantic tree with a soft bark. And what I noticed is that there was writings all in the bark. And I asked somebody, I was like, what is that? And they said, oh, it's our history, it's our stories. Like, we write what happened on the bark, and the tree grows and the story grows with the tree. And that's how they keep their record for hundreds of years. And I realized that with the transatlantic slave trade and the dismantling of family, the dismantling of community, the stripping away of narrative and story and language, and putting Black people, shifting us, and we're constantly on the move. We didn't have the privilege of place and location and land to say, this is where we will memorialize our culture, our people, our history, our story. So we had to move in this way of memorializing in the spirit and the soul, through song, through word, through rhythm, through dance, through our words, through oral tradition. We memorialize. And I think that's what makes actually this memorial at George Floyd Square so deeply profound, is that what we see is this reclamation of land and space to say, we are here. Yeah. And you're not going to move us. And I'd like to see you try. And so it's kind of reclaiming the fact that colonization and slavery kept us on the move and forced us to memorialize through oral tradition. And we hold that, and we will continue to hold that. And we will also now start to memorialize through anchoring space. So as you mentioned earlier, the African American History Museum, the lynching memorial, and other spaces as they emerge and pop up, we're in a generation where we are going to start to see the reclamation of land and space, acknowledging that it's first and foremost Indigenous land that was stolen, right? And it's a gift for us to share and hold space and honor those who cared for and understood the land when we were trafficked and put on it to work it, and it wasn't our own. And so the ways in which we reclaim land, I believe, also has to be in deep relationship with our Indigenous brothers and sisters. And so it's like this collective reclaiming for holistic healing and remembrance and storytelling. So I think that's why the earth has to be so deeply a part of this process of memorialization, because the earth, too, scripture says, cries out for justice. And so, there's something about both the oral tradition as memorialization and also anchoring memorialization in physical earth objects.
Yeah, you made me think of the 17th, 18th, 19th century music of Africans in America. I've heard Black theologians refer to that as the Third Testament, because it's in our own words and language. So you can't use it against us the way that the Bible is used against, the First and Second Testaments are used. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Someone asked on the chat if I had social media. I'm terrible with social media. I'm going to start working on that. I have all the platforms. I just never use them. But I am going to start working on it. You can follow me at Jeanelle Austin. I think all my social media accounts are simply that, JeanelleAustin.
Well, it's not like you're not busy.
I know, right? Social media does take up a lot of time. I'm going to have to hire a young person and just say, will you be my social media person, and give them a job. There it is. Yeah.
Well, we're going, first of all, can we all collectively thank Janelle for her gift to us today? Yeah, you have infused something special in us, and Roy is going to lead us in communion as we close our time together.
Yes, as we come together to end our formal time today, I'm struck how all of these threads come together. The thread of community, the thread of memorial, the thread of the reminder that we not only enjoy a memorial, but that we are to become a memorial. We end our formal time every week with communion. On the night when Jesus was betrayed, he said, as often as you come together as my beloved community, do this that I might be remembered. And he took the bread and he broke it. He said, this bread is my body, which is broken for you. Take it and eat. After supper, he took the cup and he said, this cup is the cup of the new covenant in my blood, poured out for you, all of you. Take it and drink. As we share bread and cup, as we build community, we are first to remember all that God has done for us. But then we are also to carry it into the world and remind the world of all that God has done, is doing, and will do. For together, we are the blessed community. Now, I believe for those of us who are able to stick around for a little bit, Kenichi and Sayuri will be leading some coffee time. So if you're able to stick around and spend about 15 minutes more, that would be wonderful. If not, let us go forward this week blessed. Amen.
So David, shall we just go right on in without the end credits?
All right, go for it.
We have about less than 10 minutes, but hey, Janelle, thank you again. This is Janelle. I mean, every time she spoke at Fuller Chapel or in a public space in the seminary, her words are balanced with grace, but yet the shaking that takes place in our consciousness. And Janelle, I just wanted to ask, I hope that from the outside, I hope that Fuller is at least making one step in the reparation of narrative and remembering. What do you think, if I may ask, what do you see from where you're at right now? And just to let you know, Pastor David actually is on the advisory council of the Pennell Center. I connected him to Dwight, and Dwight and him know each other. So now he's included in that, so just wanted to let you know that.
Wonderful.
So what do you see from your space? I mean, from where you're at right this moment, do you see any progress we might be making?
Who's the we again?
Fuller.
Fuller Seminary. I honestly haven't really paid much attention to Fuller. I think I've been busy trying to fight the city of Minneapolis. So, which is, I think it's a bigger beast in terms of really trying to get the people of Minneapolis a kind of restorative justice. Y'all, did you know that our governments across the nation put 17,000 troops onto the ground last summer across 23 states to fight our youth, to fight our babies? 17,000 troops. Like, that is absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah.
And the fact that we have to pay for that, like, and so there's this kind of deep injustice and deep need for restorative justice that I feel that our governments owe communities for the trauma that has occurred in our communities. My hope for places like Fuller Seminary, my hope for places in church institutions across the country is that we start to really address our theologies of justice. So that way, I think oftentimes, especially in evangelical churches, we like to place reconciliation as the higher goal, as opposed to justice as the higher goal. And the issue with that is that people are skipping over the fact that there is a break, or there are specific tangible needs that need to get met, and you can't really bring people together who've never been together before, and so you can't reconcile something that's never been together. And so, but what you can do is bring justice. And so my hope is that evangelical churches, non-evangelical churches, anybody who identifies as believing in God will get on a path of understanding that we need to be able to join forces to make right the wrongs that have happened in our society, and center that as a part of our faith and not make it simply optional to our faith.
Yes. I hear you, Janelle. Thank you. And in the educational system, that means curriculum, course offering,
Yeah, absolutely.
or administration, all that, faculty hire, everything. Got it.
Oh yeah, all that. Just again, justice is the process of making things right. I think here's the thing about educational systems is that those institutions are inherently wrong.
Yep.
So I don't actually rely on the educational systems to bring the justice, because they're the ones that need to be corrected.
Yes.
Because they were built to perpetuate racialized structures and systems, or racialized ideas and ideologies that would train us to think and believe a certain way. I was actually reflecting a couple of weeks ago, and I was like, all my training in cross-cultural whatever did not prepare me for the kind of cross-cultural work that I'm doing today, because it was being taught from a white lens going into Black and brown communities across the world. And so there's a gap even in that curriculum that I do not expect those institutions to be able to fill, because they don't have the voices within their institution to fill them. Those voices are the people who have been systematically left out of their faculty, left out of their curriculum, left out. Anyways, so many of these institutions really need to be torn down and rebuilt. It's so hard to just try to reform them. It's the same thing as the police institutions. But you can't reform something that's inherently wrong, that's inherently evil. It needs to be torn down and rebuilt. That is why we in the church have baptism. Like, we go down under, I was like baptized in the lake. I don't know, some people may have been sprinkled, whatever tradition you was baptized in. If you were baptized, I was put down under and brought back up, because it's that symbol of dying to then be reborn into something new. And this idea that we don't have to die, these institutions don't have to die to rebirth something that is more just and new. I don't know how we make off on that. Like, that doesn't make any sense. If we're saying that people have to do it, but the institutions can stay the same, that's just a hot mess. I'm sorry. Yeah.
No, Janelle, you're right on point. Thank you. Yes.
Janelle, can I ask another question? You,
Sure.
when you were talking there about, the need to focus on justice and how we all in this country, and I would say both in the evangelical church and then in the society as a whole with respect to like politics, right? We need to come together. We need to reconcile. There's all this focus about bridging the divide without, like you said, the focus on healing, fixing the real issues and the justice. So I'm sure you could talk about that for hours, and everything you said resonated with me, but I had this deep sense that I could not articulate it like you had. Is there any, which is not a surprise to anybody, is there any resources that you would point me to help further articulate that, and in terms of focusing on justice and why we can't just, heal the divide between right and left, or bring the church back together and reconcile first? Does that make any sense at all?
That makes perfect sense. And the resource that I'm going to send you to may feel like an unlikely resource, but it's simply this. Stamped, and which is a book by Kendi, is it Ibram Kendi? I'm forgetting his first name. Ibram Kendi, yep. So stamped and or stamped from the beginning. And then there's also Henry Louis Gates Jr., like all his history books. And then there's another book, I'll have to look it up. But essentially history books by Black and Indigenous people or people of color. Like, and the reason why is because oftentimes people want to jump to the current narratives to fix the problem, but they don't even know what the problem is. And so you have to actually go back. This is the whole Sankofa bird thing in Black traditions. You got to look back in order to understand where you're going to go. And so we can't go into this fight blind and unprepared. And so it's so important that folks actually start reading history and reconstructing their understanding of what actually happened, because the whole education system existed to help us misremember. So there's the disremembrance, and then there's the misremembrance. And so our understanding of history as taught by white educational systems is actually a skewed perspective of history. And so what we fight, we don't even really understand what we're fighting. Even the ways in which Martin Luther King was memorialized. Martin Luther King was memorialized by the government in such a way where he was emptied of his power. And so he's remembered in a way that the government want the general public to remember him, not for what he really did or who he really was and the words he really scripted on pen. Like, because a lot of his words are damning words. if you actually read King, it really pushes us to be a different kind of people group. But the way the government memorializes him is just that little snippet of his "I Have a Dream" speech, and they and trying to contrast him against Malcolm X. But towards the end of their lives, they were actually coming together on the same perspective. And so understanding history and what really happened and how it really happened is the most important part to beginning to understand how we're actually going to pursue justice.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Dr. David, am I on the right track, or am I just correct me if I'm off?
No, I'm loving this. I'm consulting you. But we need to give you a break.
Christopher, to me. Thanks, Matt.
So, Janelle, though we want to continue to